Okay, good morning everyone. Well, it's probably not morning for everyone there. Hope you can all hear me clearly. Just if someone's on the chat and wants to drop me a message to say I can hear you, that'd be great. Just going to check that everything looks good on this end. It looks like it is. Excellent. So, welcome to my May live stream. And if you think, hey, you look like you've just woken up, it's because, well, yes, I have just woken up. It's just on 6 a.m. here in Japan and on a Sunday. So it's nice and quiet and the kids are sleeping. So while they are, I've got a bit of time to do a live stream. So to start with, I'd like to say thank you to all my patrons who supported me, and a lot of them probably online now and asking questions and helping out. It's because of them I'm able to continue doing this kind of thing and doing reviews. Now, to start with, of course, to say thank you to my patrons, I'm going to draw something. I have actually I drew these before, but the person who won them didn't want them, so they're still available. It's a pair of RHA T20 in-ear monitors, and actually I thought these were pretty decent. They use a kind of dual, like a dual voice coil system to give extra thump, and they've got some quite thumping bass. Anyway, these I reviewed quite a while ago, so I'm going to, without further ado, I have a container here full of all my $2 and above patrons, and they've been quite thoroughly mixed. So what I'm going to do, I'll give this a bit more of a mix, and we'll see if the person whose name I draw out wants them, get a pair of T20 in-ear monitors. And so that person this month is going to be someone who's been around a while, Functional Doc. Congratulations! If you want a pair of RHA T20s, these are yours. So, congratulations. That's good. Someone who's been around quite a long time. It's always nice to have a patron who's been around and supporting for a long while and someone I've chatted to win something. So, that's fantastic. Now, we didn't have a lot of questions this month. I don't know. It's been a quiet month. And one of them was just actually not posted in the description at the moment. I may as well start by answering questions, and then I'll get on to questions from chat, and we'll see how we go. And thanks for the messages saying that the stream is working great. I had trouble before, but I think I managed to fix it, and it looks like I have. The first question is one that comes up a lot, and I think it's an important one, and I see it online all the time, is people ask, what's the benefit of a balanced connection? Because you see people online going, oh, they sounded better balanced and blah, 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 blah. I was thinking, why? Do they not know what's going on? So we need to go into some history, and I should have done a slideshow for this, as it would help. You can look up these things. I should probably post it in the description too. And I should probably do a timing mark to say when this is. I'm just seeing if I can see what time it is at the moment in the stream. The 6:45 minute mark. 6 minute 45. Someone asked, can you put links to when the questions are? So 6:45 is going to be the first one. It probably won't be 6:45. It probably won't be exactly this time, because I'm going to cut the very beginning of the video where I just have the website and I was testing that the stream health is okay. So anyway, back to the question. Why is people always saying, oh, balanced, these sound better balanced and all that, and they're confused, or they're misunderstanding what's going on. So back to the history. Tyle Hertzens used to run a company called Headroom, which is now being, what was left of it was bought out by the guys who run Headphones.com. Tyle bought Headphone.com without the S, which is a good move. And I bought my original Sennheiser HD800s from the original Headroom, and I don't have them here it's on the desk anymore, but I got a pair of the old, very cool speaker stands under which you can mount all the Headroom electronics if you want to do a near field system, including balanced amps, DAC, Class D speaker amps and stuff like that. Anyway, they had some really cool stuff, which is sad they've now gone, but so Tyle, originally all headphones were what we call single-ended, used a 6.3mm connection, which I should, and you had this or 3.5, which were essentially the same thing. So what Tyle did is he got two more or less 2 amps, and he put them together in one chassis and called it the blockhead. And they were literally 2 separate amps. They had even separate power inputs. And he used the 3-pin XLR connection, but reversed. Now, 3-pin XLR for balanced is the male. I have to think about this. The male is always it goes in the direction of the pins always, so it's the easy way I remember it. So normally on the back of a balanced DAC you have the male sockets are the output, or a balanced preamp or whatever. So he reversed that, so it was the female. So the reason was that you couldn't accidentally stick your fingers in and short, maybe, or damage the amp or something like that. By reversing the connector, and well, it looked cooler. I don't know if that was the reason. I've never asked him specifically, and I can't remember if he's ever posted, but he ended up reversing it, I presume also so that people wouldn't misplug things. And so you'd have this, you have to do a speaker cable and have to split it, so you'd have one going into one amp and one going into the other. And this became, and he wrote a blurb saying that balanced was better because of various reasons, and I don't know if that's online anywhere, or probably if you look in the Wayback Machine, it's probably still there. And it became kind of legendary, such that everyone who promoted balanced connection said, "Oh, actually, balanced connection is better because," and then linked to the original Headroom article. Now, balanced connections are used in pro audio for long cable runs, because cables all pick up noise, and that's why you have things like braiding and twisting, is to avoid them becoming a big long aerial, because if you have an aerial or antenna wire, it's not twisted, it's straight. So to avoid noise pickup, if you have differential lines, that is balanced lines, it can cancel out or basically eliminate the noise. And because the only difference between the positive and negative signals is the noise, so it can be cancelled out. Now, if you have very long cable runs, even if you have good cable, you're going to pick up some noise, so that's why they use balanced. And ironically, funny thing, they use XLR connectors, but they also actually use this same headphone TRS connector, but this becomes the positive, the negative, and the ground reference. Instead of left, right, and ground, it becomes positive and negative. And there's an interesting irony to that, because essentially the simplest kind of balanced amp is essentially to take you can actually, people have done this, they've DIY'd, for example, two single-ended amps. So you'd have a left channel and a right channel, and instead they've used two of these, left channel and then left channel positive, left channel negative, using the right channel circuitry, but with just the polarity reversed. And then they've done the same with the second one. So that's all they've done, is they've doubled the amplification and reversed one. And so I think this was originally used a lot for increasing power output, which goes back into power output of amps and Class A and Class AB and something I've discussed before, which is a lot of amps are listed as, they say it's a Class A amp, and then they say they have X amount of watts power output, but by the time they get anywhere near that, they're already in Class AB mode. But whatever the reason, and I don't remember the fine details, people were getting into, say, for example, the AMB DIY amp, such as the Beta 22, was originally designed as a single-ended amp, but people were making them balanced. They were taking, again, just as I said, they were taking instead of they had one circuit board per channel, so instead of taking 2 circuit boards, they'd take 4 and then use them for, instead of 2 circuit boards for left and right, you'd have left positive, left negative, right positive, right negative. So you have various builds. There were even very interesting builds, such as 3-board builds, where you'd have left positive, right positive, and then you'd have instead of ground, you'd have actually a amp working in as like a return was amplified, which is kind of really weird. But anyway, it gets more and more and more complex and interesting as there were 2, 4, 2, 3, and 2, 3, 4, and 5. It gets ridiculous. Anyway, so we have this doubling of power, which might have kept some of these circuits in Class A longer for turning the volume up, but they're probably gross overkill. And so people will tend to, it's resulted in people saying balanced is better. And I think what it comes down to, if we take an amp behind me, such as this Master 9, is if we think about the only, for most amps that we have, let's just ignore balance for the moment. For most amps that we just have to say we have a connector, we just plug in headphones, and we think, oh, this sounds good or whatever. If there are tubes, we think, oh, we can change tubes and it sounds a little bit different. Maybe tube is nicer. But when we start changing connectors, we start thinking, oh, well, there's obviously a difference. You know, we have a single-ended input, we have a balanced input. And so if all amps had been balanced to begin with, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And I don't know how to explain this well. I think it's perception. If we perceive, oh, we're doing something different, or we're getting more power, or we're getting something that's more or better, there's an immediate assumption that it must be more or better. And so if you have an amp like the Master 9, if I plug in using only the single-ended socket, then I'm only using half the circuitry. So obviously if I plug into the balance connector, I'm using the whole circuitry and I'm changing the circuit. So it's going to sound slightly different. At the very least, it might, if it was made with an extreme linearity, it might sound pretty much identical, but there's maybe going to be an increase in volume out of the balanced outputs, unless the circuit is designed in some very funny way that eliminates that. And so since it's the most easiest thing to be fooled by is an increase in gain, an increase in volume basically, it's for people are going to perceive it sounds better. But more so to the point, this is designed as a balanced amp. It's going to perform best in its balanced mode. So whatever happens, we're going to perceive balanced as better. Same with a lot of portable players, just to grab the most expensive one, Kane N8. This is not a good example. Let's just get because it's got tubes as well and power modes. The M2X. So this is a little portable amp which is new and coming up for review. It has a balanced output. It has a 2.5mm socket. And it has more power output from the balance. Same with the Theo M9, which I reviewed. Same as everything I've reviewed. Now, it's perfectly easy to design a portable player with enough power out of the single-ended socket. I mean, you have the Theo amps, such as the X7, which has amp modules. And the amp module, you can get a single-ended amp module which has heaps of power output. You don't need the balance. It's not going to provide you with any benefit. But I think it's a perception thing. I mean, if you're powering IEMs, you don't need balance. It's not going to make any benefit. Companies like Chord and Benchmark make perfectly good electronics, which have single-ended outputs, and they have the lowest distortion from single-ended. Actually, Benchmark wrote a whole white paper saying balanced was for headphone output was complete waste of time. It's not to say that it is or isn't. I think it's very much a perception thing. It's become a trend. And if a specific maker, like Audio GD prefers balanced designs, that's fine. It's a circuit choice. Some manufacturers prefer tube amps. Some manufacturers prefer make really good hybrids, like Cavalli. Each manufacturer has their own circuit preference. But because balance requires a change of headphone connector, there's a kind of perception thing there. And there's also, if you compare to the single-ended output, as I said, in one of these designs, there might be a slight difference because there's a change of circuit, there's a change of power output, probably a change of gain, which can really easily trick you. There's no kind of benefit in going balanced. If you want to use specific electronics that have got balanced outputs, then that's fine. But things like this portable gear, it's all just a trend. It actually provides no true benefit other than making it you feel like you're getting more, really. As I said, you can do perfectly high power outputs using single-ended outputs, and I've had perfectly good DAPs like the Calix M9 which could do that as well. So is there a real benefit? It's a kind of, no, it's a marketing thing, really. It's really it's a kind of cool factor. It's a gear factor. It's better to buy electronics on there, whether they provide the features that you want, or if you prefer particular sound of or particular design, and whether they match with the headphones or IEMs that you're using, and all that kind of thing, rather than, oh, it has balanced. It kind of is a bit of a trick. That's my opinion anyway. Even though they can be benefits, the electronics that are available nowadays, the amplification circuits, the chips, all that, it can be all done single-ended fine. And actually the of course the best measuring, or the best, technically best stuff is the chord stuff, and it's all single-ended. Even though the higher end stuff has balanced outputs, actually the single-ended outputs are technically better performing. Anyway, that's a kind of long answer to a short question, but the short answer, mostly it's marketing. But just it's the hobby. Have fun with it. So, okay, do we have any? We had one more question actually, which I've just gone because it's too early in the morning and I'm not fully awake. I've completely forgotten. So let me find where it was posted. Someone asked me, which one of those things that I really shouldn't answer. Where was it? Worst customer service in the industry. Oh God, that's a terrible question. But because the company is very, very, very long gone, I can actually talk about it. So I always, you always see complaints online about customer service. But way back 10 years ago, and you can search for this, is a company that was called Single Power. And it was run by a guy, I think he was Russian. It was around when I started. So he was making tube amps, and he was going pretty crazy. He was making pretty high-end tube amps, and I think there are still a couple people who've got a couple running who refuse to investigate why if they're still safe. So he had a range of I think 3 tube amps, which were standard, and then he had some very high-end custom things he was doing for people. And this was long before. This is when I think the best headphones that were out there were, and discontinued at the time, were the Sony MDR R10s. There were no HD800s, there were no planars, nothing like that. Different between that and other headphones, you basically had HD650s, what we now call what's most well known now as the Mastrop HD6XX. So there was a huge gulf, and basically if you went higher than that, you bought stacks. So anyhow, so Single Power was making some custom tube amps up to $14,000. Now I think $14,000 these days is the retail price of a Cord Dave. You realize how ridiculous this gets. And he's making these high-end tube amps in these huge boxes, and they had tubes sticking out here and there. And he had a huge box for the tube amp and a huge box for the power supply. And he'd screwed these things so tightly shut that you couldn't open them and find out what was inside. You probably have to use an impact driver to get them open. But what would happen is you'd order these things, and then it was normal to wait a couple of years before you got your order. And then people would get them, and then stuff wasn't working, or he said, oh, he could email you and say, oh, I've got these great improvements I can make to your amp, which will make it sound even better. So you'd send it in, and then a couple of years later, you might get it back, and you'd email him, when's it ready? Oh, it'll be ready next week. It'll be ready next week. Now, you see, now we're used to this kind of nonsense on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and we already know. Nowadays, we'd look at this and go, no way, this is a scam. And it was. He was slowly running out of money and running himself into the ground and getting a divorce, and I don't know what was going on, but he would someone got back their amp a couple of years after they'd handed it in for some upgrade, and they noticed that their amp originally had like 3 feet on the bottom, and then they suddenly had an amp with 4 feet on the bottom. And this was the scam. He'd wait until someone else sent he'd obviously taken an order but couldn't afford to make the amps. So he'd wait till someone sent it in for upgrades, and then he'd sell the amp to someone else. And then he'd have to wait for someone else's amp to come in, and then before he could send back the original amp. And yeah, he basically was stuffing people around, and he'd run out of money, and he vanished. And the other thing he was doing was very dangerous stuff. I don't know if you know how a transformer works, but transformers, you have 2 or 4 wires in, depending on the voltage you want, and then they're wound around the magnet, and then wound around on top of that is the output wires, and the number of windings decides how much the voltage in, voltage out ratio. I don't know if when I was a kid, we used to do experiment. You'd get a bar magnet, and you could make your own transformer just as an experiment, as you know, as an experiment, and we did that, so I know how transformers work. What he was doing is there are primary windings and secondary windings, and primary is like your power in, and then secondary is your out. He was using some of the primary windings as secondary windings. Don't ask me how he. Anyone who knows electronics will know this is super, super, super bad. Anyway, he's wiring up his some of his amps as a kludge to, maybe he ran out of money. I don't know what the deal was, but he's wiring it up in a way that basically the amp could explode. So if you search on Headphone for anything, search for thread titles with single power, and you'll find the grenade one. And some of the stuff in there, I don't know if the pictures are still there, but some of the stuff, someone took one apart and said, this is so dangerous. There were guys out there who were repairing people's amps because obviously single power was not going to do so. And by that time he was universally hated. It was pretty bad. So that's the worst customer service story. Well, even worse than customer service is basically, selling other people's stuff back to you. I heard people who had not received, a couple of people had not received their LH Labs gear, had actually ended up getting stuff that had been staff owned stuff with scratches and whatever had just been sent out to them, and they were pretty pissed off. So that kind of thing does happen. The same like you occasionally hear stories about, you buy something and the box is all shrink wrapped. When you open it up, it's got obviously been used because the store or whatever took it back in and then try to make it look like new, but didn't do a crap good job, and then just stuck it out as stock to avoid having to mark it down. I knew places like that too. That kind of stuff happens, and thankfully not often, because now the old story we were told before internet was as big as it is now was unhappy customer will tell twice as many people as a happy customer, and now it's with the amplification of the internet. It's like that's just exponentially worse. As a very dissatisfied customer will just tell everyone they possibly can and cause a big fuss online, and dealing with that is just a nightmare for companies. So it's the kind of thing they really don't want to do. The companies really don't want to screw up in that way if they want to get business. So, and how my voice is already dying. Questions on the chat, if my voice doesn't die. Should I buy the RE2000 Silver or go for the Atlas at 1300? I haven't heard the silver version. Question. Wait up, hold on, Atlas at 1300. My brain's not working in the morning. So, I don't know, it depends on sounds engineer. I don't know how different the RE2000 is. Someone posted online that the RE2000 sounds a bit different from the gold one, and I have the gold one. So RE2000 at $700 is pretty, the gold one was $2,000 new. The only thing is I found was it's very tip sensitive. If you try and use it, you can use a larger variety of tips with the Atlas than you can the RE2000. I found it very tip sensitive. No, good question. They're both somewhat V-shaped, though the Atlas is it got even more bass thump. Yeah, it's a tricky one. There's no correct answer to that. I don't want to decide on what people spend. I don't think there's a bad choice there personally. Are you going to get your hands on the new DT177X Go? There is a new one. Where was that? Make a note. DT177X. I'll look it up and I'll have a look. I haven't got any plans. Actually, everything that's going to come up in a review that I either have or is coming up is actually on my website. Just look there. I actually put a little list of everything that's coming up. There's a lot more coming up. I just organized, people have asking about the stacks, the basic stack setup, so I'm going to get that in. The problem is, of course, it's 100 volts here, and the stacks gear, that particularly, I forgot the model. There's a US or a US/Europe only model, so they're actually sending one. I have a transformer, so I'm going to use that. And then, so actually, Stacks International are sending me an amp, and the Stacks Japan are sending me the headphones. So we'll be doing a Stacks review of that. Let me just have a look. Have I tried the Hugo TT2 and M scaler? Not yet. Only in shows. I should organize doing that, and at the moment I'm kind of at the limit of amps that I can review. So if I have any more stuff, it ends up just sitting in the box for ages. So I had a plan to do that, and it's kind of not quite worked out, but I will. Why is it hard to make a powerful tube amp for headphones? Okay, so that's a good question. You could say there are three kinds of tube amps, or actually there are two kinds of tube amps, and there's one hybrid. So tube amps are normal. Basic headphone tube amps are usually output transformerless. So the output is more or less from the tubes, and they have a high output impedance, which means they can do high voltage swing but not high current, which was fine back in the days when you had HD600, HD650 were the top headphones around, and then the HD800 came out. It's to make them, well, I say more powerful. Well, you can change voltage into current by putting transformers in, so you have what's called a transformer coupled amp, where the output is through a transformer. It's not sitting here now. The Studio 6 is transformer coupled. A lot of amps are that way. The Woo Audio WA22, just off the top of my head, it's a balanced amp. Even though the circuit is single-ended, it uses transformers to make it balanced. That's another way to change voltage to current. The third way is to make a hybrid of some kind, where you make a tube amp and then you have a couple of capacitors to connect the circuits, and then you have a solid-state circuit, so the tube acts as a gain stage. And there's another one, the Cavalli way, which is you take a solid-state amp, and one of the gain stages, instead of having a transistor in there, you remove the transistor and put in a tube, which means changing the circuit a bit more than that. But essentially, that's what the Cavalli ones were. Integrated tube into the whole amplification stage, and there's a hybrid as well. So it is possible, but usually the way it's done is using a hybrid, and it's to do with current more so than voltage. So that's another thing actually about power, which I will talk about, is people say, oh, I've turned my volume all the way up, this amp must not have much power. People confuse power and gain, and I'll make a note in the time when I say this actually, so I can put it in the description. Where is the time on this thing? 31-minute mark. Okay. 31-minute mark. So power and gain are not the same thing. Gain is essentially, let's say you turn your volume knob up. Gain is how much, the ratio between the input and the output. So if you have a gain of 1, then the input volume and output volume are the same. And if you have a gain of 2, it doubles or whatever. But you often have gains of, for IEMs you might have a gain of 1, for headphones a gain of about 8 or 9, and then something like double that, or not quite double that, for things like the HE6 or Susvara. And that's just basically the ratio of the input and the output. The amount of power an amp has is, well, it's a measurement of the actual maximum amount of power it can put out, and that's whether it actually output its maximum power, of course, might be related to the gain. But usually the volume control is on the input of an amp. So this is an exception. But most basic amps have the volume control is just adjusting how much of the signal that's coming in is going into the amplification. That's all it's doing. And ideally they'd set it up so that the maximum volume, it doesn't reach the point where the amp just runs out of steam and starts running out of power. But just don't confuse volume and power. If you have a low gain on an amp, you turn the volume right up and you're not very loud. If you have low power, then with high impedance headphones, you'll get the soundstage will collapse. It's very audible. Instead of at a low volume, you might have the soundstage out here, but as you turn the volume up, it all sounds like it's in a blob in the center, or kind of very down in a tunnel. You don't have this. This is very rare to hear these days. But for planers, when you get low, not enough power, you will get fast music will become blurry, essentially, because it just can't send out the power. can't send out enough current to move the diaphragms fast enough. So someone was actually, it's a good one. Someone was asking. They had a this wasn't to do with power, but someone was asking why the decay on some Odyssey LCD4s was too fast with cymbals. Like the decay was very fast, and they weren't hearing the fine detail. And it turned out the amp is not that detailed. So, but that I don't think to do with power. The amp was powerful enough. It just wasn't very detailed for some reason. I'm not sure. Just that particular amp model was, I don't know. So it is possible to make a powerful tube amp, just as a matter of the construction and design. But typically they were voltage. They were designed for high voltage output. So, have you used the Samsung SR850? No. Actually, there's a list. Okay, go to here, click on About, click on my name. It's got a list of everything I've got here. Maybe slightly out of date because I haven't put these in the list yet. And everything I've ever used is in that list. So that's the basic place to check first before asking me. Liquid metal, the screw threads. That's about the single power amp. You should check. I don't know if he's just hammered them in or glued them in. I'm not sure. But he obviously had to be able to update them. The thing that was interesting about that old single power issue was, so you had this huge, power supply thing, and when they finally opened it, they found 2 giant wall warts in there. So, yeah, he was scamming people. It was pretty impressive. If you want to read how things used to be, it was pretty bad. Why are tube amps not the best choice to drive planar magnetic headphones? It's only with tube amps, if their output transformer less, like Shit Audio's Valhalla 2, they just don't have the current to drive, the actual power to drive planar headphones. They're designed for high impedance headphones where voltage is more important. So something like a Valhalla 2 is a great bargain for something like HD800s or the HD6XX, but if you try and put planars in there, it just sounds weak. It just doesn't have the current. So real power is actually current, which is why your power socket has 1 amp of current, and it's why you can, because it has current, it's dangerous. And that's why you can, an electric shock has very high, static shock has very high voltage, and it won't kill you because it has almost no current. So voltage is one thing and current is another. So an electrostatic shock could be 1,000,000 volts, or I don't know what it is, 1,000,000 volts, but it won't kill you because it has no current. The PowerPoint might only have 115 volts or whatever, but it has 1 amp of current, and that can kill you. So that's basically why. So voltage and current are 2 different things. Voltage might be, I'm not sure, terrible analogy. Think of a road. Current might be how wide the road is, and voltage might be how fast you can go on the road. So if you can have a very narrow 1-lane road, but you can drive very fast down that. That's like voltage. But current is like if you have a very wide road, you can actually get more going down there. So voltage or speed seems like a bigger thing, but actually it's not. There's more actual, you could say, energy in a road which has got a multi-lane road which has got more cars going down it at a slower speed. So that's probably it's a kind of crappy analogy, but it's the one I mentally use when I think about it. Yes. What's your opinion on high-end IEMs versus full-sized headphones? So, this thing called the pinna of your ear, it's been done by a few people, I think, but on TV years and years ago, there was I remember a scientific experiment. It's kind of an obvious one, but what they did is they got someone and they fired sounds around them, and they asked them to point to where the sounds were. Did that. Then what they did is they covered their ear in a mold, which left only just a hole going through. So it basically covered all their ear except for this hole going through. And then they asked them to where the sounds were coming from, and they had no idea. So this is what decides where sounds are coming from, because your brain learns from the reflections of sound in your ear where the direction of sounds are coming from. That's what we perceive sound stage in music. So at least with speakers, we have 2 channels usually, if not more, and we can assuming some degree of accuracy, we can hear that, oh, the drums are over in that corner and the piano's there and the singer's right in front of you and all that. With headphones, it's a little bit, you lose a little bit of that, which is why people, they angle speak the drivers forward in a lot of headphones. You lose a little bit, but of that sense of space, but it still can be there. And if it's a binaural recording, you will have that very strongly there, actually probably even better so than speakers, because binaural recording uses a dummy head with microphones where the ears are. So if you try binaural recording, you can hear very clearly where the sounds are coming from around you. The problem is with IEMs is you stick them in your ears and then you lose this pinner and you lose the sense of where sound is coming from. And while it can be faked by we perceive sound not just by direction but by timing as well, which is why there's a lot of discussion with digital electronics about the timing accuracy of digital. You see anything Rob Watts wrote on Headphone about that, there's a lot of stuff there. This is, science, and there are plugins. I think one was called Cans 3D, and there are a few around. And there, what are the other ones? Where it fakes a surround sound stage by delaying the timing of certain frequencies to give you a fake sense of sound stage, and it can make a 2-channel pair of headphones sound like their surround sound. I forgot. Someone was going to remember the plugin name or the software name. So with IEMs, you lose that you lose all that ability to get sound stage. Although you, again, maybe with software you can semi-fake it. So that's probably the main thing you lose. But IEMs are their own kind of issue. I was just thinking yesterday I was at the Fukuoka Earphone show. So I'm going to put a video about that. And that allowed me to try a lot of stuff that I missed in the Tokyo show for various reasons. And I was looking at one of the tables. One of the distributors, there's one distributor in Japan who distributes most of the in-ear monitors in Japan that are not Japanese brands. And I was looking, they had all these models which were $2,000, $3,000. And I'm thinking, to me, it's starting to look crazy. I mean, I don't understand what $3,000 benefit $3,000 IEMs would have. I think because I guess it's I'd say people in a lot of people in Asia who like Hong Kong where their system is, and I was going to talk about this in the video for things like this might be someone's entire system in place, like Hong Kong, where they can't have speakers and they can't have a desktop system and they're not around enough in their own apartment to listen to it. For that kind of market, maybe these multi-$1,000 IEMs make sense, but I don't really. A few manufacturers have told me they don't want to price gouge and make $2,000 IEMs specifically because they think it's crazy. But if some people have the money, some people want the best that their companies can make, and they really like it. So, but it's kind of has gone a little bit crazy, but it's a very niche thing. It's actually very small in the whole world of in-ear monitors and headphones. So it's not driving prices up or anything like that. I mean, if you don't have the money, you can safely ignore the high-end IEM market. And that's what I'd say. Let's have a look where we're at on the chat. Mass drop. Where are we? Are you noticing good technical progress year to year? It seems like a lot of DACs use 5-year-old chips. I think in many areas, yeah, there's progress. Some things have they hit the limit. I think in the low end of things, the cheap stuff, the progress is making. Normally, 5-10 years ago, 10 years ago, $100 IEMs were rubbish. Nowadays, they're fantastic. Not fantastic, but good. You can get $50 IEMs, which are actually pretty decent. With electronics, with DAC chips, that's a good one. Yes, people are very limited in that. Most companies, there are very few companies, almost no companies, who can make a DAC without using a DAC chip. Chord's probably about the only one. But that's very, very far removed from a normal DAC in many respects in the terms of the technology. But a lot of people are going the way of, if they're not making resistor ladder DACs such as Audio GD, or I've got the Hollow Springs in here, they are making if they are using a DAC chip, they're writing their own digital filters and putting them on an FPGA, and that's improved things a lot because the digital filters built into DAC chips tend to be kind of rather average. And so in that way, in digital, they're making progress. But again, you have to find someone who can write that code onto an FPGA, which is not like programming a computer at all. It's like programming, it's like writing your own operating system. It's pretty hardcore stuff, and it requires money. Odyssey is making a new gaming headphone version of the LCD-X. I saw that. That's pretty cool. Obviously, the gaming market is big. Is the new Campfire Polaris good? It's very V-shaped. I was just listening to another set of IEMs yesterday from Final, which was 1BA, 1DD, and it sounded very similar. So they're kind of very V-shaped in their sound. So I'll talk about those in the review. Where are we at? Monoprice THX 788. Oh, I've got the Mastrop THX amp in. That's pretty good too. Which, so you can get a sneak preview. It doesn't quite knock off these things, but it's still pretty good. It's very good value. Where are we at? What's the difference between the Sony Z1R and Utopia? Did I talk about them? I should have talked about them. And check my Utopia review. I thought I taled about them. I had them here at the same. I thought I had them here at the same time. I borrowed both from. I'm going to have to go back on memory. I borrowed both from a friend at the same time who owned both. I thought it was the same time, but they're very different sounding. The Utopia is much more on the kind of upper mid, strong focus, where the Sonys are more warmer bass focus, bass and mid range, I'd actually say. So you can probably get away with you listening to a larger variety of music with the Sonys. They're more all-rounders, whereas the Utopias are kind of better for acoustic music. That's probably the simple answer. Mezet Rai Penta. Haven't got those in yet. I should ask. I forgot all about that. Where are we at? Odyssey LCD i4. Affordable version of the Susvara. I don't know why I never got around to reviewing those. I've heard everyone I've heard who's had a pair I've heard from has really liked them. Verum ones, yes. Just ordered a pair. I think they're good. You might have to replace the cable though. I found when I had the Periapt, who make these inexpensive cables. They'd sent me a whole bunch, and I remembered I had one for the HE350, and it's the same 2.5mm socket. Hopefully your one will get a 3.5mm socket for the headphones, not 2.5mm. The 2.5mm had issues cutting out. Getting good 2.5mm sockets, well, that's kind of difficult. So he told me he's going to change it to 3.5mm sockets for the connection, which is going to be much better because but it's a very good sounding headphone for the money. It's excellent. It just also, but it was a huge difference between using the stock cable and even changing to this Periapt one. The stock cable was some really, really thin. Where is it? The stock cable. It's just this really, really skinny, thin, cheap thing. He's probably ordered a bunch from China, and it actually. This is, they're planers. They need current, and having a really, really thin wire, putting high current through a thin wire in a small connector is just, it doesn't work. Anyway, even moderate current actually. Okay, let's see. Okay, so when asking questions, I see someone's asking a lot of questions there. Just a note, again, see this, where are we? See there? Go to that site, click on About, click on my name, and check if the stuff I've heard and the stuff I've experienced with and stuff I haven't. Because if I don't have experience with it, I can't talk about it. It's just silly. It's like, will buying a Ferrari be better than my Toyota Camry? Well, I've never driven a Ferrari. I can imagine what it must be like, but I've never driven one. It's the same thing. Okay, so that's going to be it for my live stream this morning, as I hear faint sounds of my kids getting up. And I just hope they haven't snuck on my wife's iPad and started watching me, as that would be very embarrassing. But have I tried the last questions though. Have you tried the Mobius with music and video games? I have. It's okay with music. It's not great, I think. It's the same as if you buy a surround sound system for your home for watching movies and listening to music. It's not going to be quite so good on music. But games, yeah, I like the 3D thing. I actually like watching YouTube stuff. I watch a lot of YouTube stuff on the Mobius, but I've played games a little bit on it, and I was going to do a review, but it's kind of hard. I'm not a gamer. I only play a couple of games, and rarely at that. And every time there's a system upgrade, they've one game that I like is only ever come out in version 1.0 for the Mac, and it means that any upgrade just kills it, and I'd actually have to get another computer. It'd be simpler for me to just buy a PC and run Steam, but I game so little nowadays, it's kind of not worth it. But actually, yeah, it was. I'm not a, I don't play multiplayer, so I don't know how well it would work for that. But I can just talk about the probably about the 3D effect is about as far as I can go. Okay, anyway. I'm going to head off, so thank you all for watching. Also, thank you for my patrons. Well, yeah, if maybe see you next month. Otherwise, I'll see you on... before I go, what I will do is, for people who want to... Give me 1 second. I'll have to post in... No, I have to find where the chat's gone. Okay, for people who might want to join and chat a little bit, this only lasts for 1 day, so people who hang around, you can join up on my Discord. Half my Discord is for patrons, and you can't see, maybe not see that half, but some general chat. It's not big, it's got a few people on there. If a couple of people come on, welcome to join and chat a bit. I don't know if I'll be around to answer a lot of questions. It's kind of questions and answers are mainly for people to support me, because obviously they're supporting me, so it's only fair enough. If you do want to consider supporting me, do check out it's very simple. The URL for supporting me is at the moment is if I can type it. You can support me on Patreon, or you can send me... Actually, there's a guy we have who just super chats me on these things, and that's how he becomes a supporter, and he gets access to the same thing as patrons. And as I say to people, for the equivalent of buying me a coffee once in a while, you get, if you want to ask me lots of questions, you can ask me lots of questions. You can get into the draw. So Drew, as one of my long-time patrons, won a pair of IEMs, and I have a cupboard full of stuff. I just don't need here anymore for various reasons. So again, patrons get that, and other benefits, which are listed on the Patreon. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you, maybe even a few of you in chat online. And I've lost OBS, as you do.